In today's video, I tested 10 different games using the new Decky DLSS Enabler plugin, and I'm going to compare it against Lossless Scaling. Now, on paper, this sounds incredible. The ability to get 2, 3, even 4 times the FPS on Steam Deck using multi-frame generation, just amazing. But after spending a lot of time testing this across different games, I've come to a very different conclusion than I expected, and after realizing how this plugin works, I really can't recommend it. I think it's one of those cases where something sounds amazing at first and it's being presented as amazing, but in practice, it's just not ready. And more importantly, it can actually cause more harm than good if you don't know what you're doing. Now, when I first heard about this plugin, I was genuinely excited. As some of you know, I already spent quite a bit of time trying to get DLSS Enabler working manually in Crimson Desert. The process was not simple at all. It involved multiple different tools, different files, a lot of trial and error. Eventually, I got something working, and not because I understood how to do it, but because somebody else showed me how to do it and I used their method. So even though I have some experience with this, even I am not experienced enough to make it work as good as it should. So naturally, when I saw a plugin that claims to automate all of that, I wanted to test it. I was excited. I thought, great, many people will be able to use this with their games. The idea of taking a complicated setup and turning it into something simple and accessible is great in theory, but after actually using it and realizing how it works, I'm honestly more concerned than impressed. So instead of just talking about it, let's go straight into some examples. And I'm going to start with Mafia: The Old Country. This is already a very demanding game for the Steam Deck. As you know, it struggles to maintain even 20 FPS most of the time, so it's not a great candidate for any kind of frame generation, be it lossless scaling or a different kind. And with the plugin, yeah, you can push the FPS into the 50 to 60 range, even more, but it doesn't feel like 60 at all. Every time the game stutters, the entire image sort of pauses for a split second. There's very noticeable ghosting around moving objects, especially on the edges of the screen, and the input lag is extremely high. Compared to lossless scaling, the FPS is lower, but the experience is more consistent. There's still visual distortion. If I had to compare the distortion, the lossless scaling one feels more like warping, while the one from the DLSS Enabler plugin feels more like artifacting. But the controls with lossless scaling feel more responsive and overall is just a bit more playable, even though in both cases the input lag is really not worth it. So right away, I think this shows an important point is that higher FPS numbers don't always mean a better experience. Next is Expedition 33. Now this one is interesting because once I actually got it working, and I'll come back to that in a bit, the performance with the plugin was actually fairly stable, input lag is manageable, and visually it looks decent. But when you compare it to lossless scaling, you're getting slightly better performance overall there, even if there's more warping and fast motion, and I think input lag with lossless scaling is generally better. So again, not a clear win, and in this case, it comes down to trade-offs and to different situations. For example, with the plugin and with fast motion in the game, so when you're actually walking around, it stutters more than it does with lossless scaling, but in actual fights where the image is more static, it does look better. Then there's Hogwarts Legacy, and here the plugin just completely falls apart. The game starts stuttering heavily, performance becomes inconsistent, it's basically unplayable. Lossless scaling, on the other hand, it works immediately, it's not perfect, you will have issues with lossless scaling in this game in the menus, and you still get some warping and some latency, but it is stable and usable. The next game I have is Remnant II. The plugin simply doesn't work here because there are version mismatches between different components it relies on, and the end result is that nothing happens. Lossless scaling, though, it just works because it doesn't mess with any of the game files, it just works on top of the game. So let's pause here for a second with the comparisons because I think this is where the core issue really is. Now, DLSS Enabler itself is actually a very interesting and powerful tool. What it does is it tricks the game into thinking you're using an NVIDIA GPU, and that unlocks DLSS and frame generation options inside the game. And if the game supports it, it will unlock multi-frame generation. I'll leave a list in the description below. There's about 100 games that do support DLSS 4 and multi-frame generation. Then you have tools like Optiscaler, and they come in and replace DLSS with AMD compatible solutions like FSR or XeSS. So effectively what people are trying to do here is build a chain of tools that replicate DLSS behavior on hardware that doesn't support it. And when this is set up properly on a per game basis, it can work really well. You can get meaningful FPS games, better image quality in some cases, and access to newer upscaling technologies. And even with the frame generation, you can still have a playable experience with minimum input lag. The key thing here is the setup is not universal. It is per game. It is a lot of tinkering, a lot of trial and error. Every game behaves differently. Every game works with different engine and has different rendering pipelines. It requires different injection methods. Different versions of these tools behave differently. Some games need specific configurations, others need workarounds just to unlock the option in the first place, like Crimson Desert, for example. So, this is not something you can just apply globally and expect consistent results. And that's exactly where this plugin struggles. The goal of the plugin is to simplify everything, to take all of this complexity and turn it into something quick and easy. But instead of actually solving the complexity, it kind of just hides it. So you're still dealing with DLL injections, multiple tools interacting with each other, different versions that may or may not be compatible, but now you don't really have control over it. Instead, the plugin gives you a list of different injection methods and essentially tells you to try them until something works. And that's where things start to break down. Because when something doesn't work here, it's not always just a simple it didn't launch. Sometimes the game crashes, sometimes the game refuses to boot. Sometimes files get modified or replaced, like in my case with Expedition 33. When I unpatched the game, it deleted a whole ass folder and I had to go and manually verify game files and download files that this plugin deleted. And this is something that isn't really communicated clearly in the original video about this plugin. And if you're familiar with these tools, you can recover from that. It's not gonna break your Steam Deck, it's not gonna break anything. If you know where to look, what to remove, and how to fix it, you can fix it. In the worst case scenario, you can just delete the game and re-download it. But if you don't know what to do, it can be very confusing and you can end up very frustrated. There's another important point here that is not mentioned at all in the original video, and that's multiplayer games. This setup involves injecting DLLs, modifying how the game behaves, and even spoofing hardware in some cases, and that's exactly the kind of thing anti-cheat systems are designed to detect. So if it works, it's not something I would ever recommend using in an online game. And that's not just about the plugin, it's about DLSS Enabler itself and Optiscaler. It's highly recommended you don't use this with any online game. Going back to the test, let's look at some more examples. So Cyberpunk 2077 is probably one of the better cases. The plugin does work here and you can get noticeable FPS boost, and the game itself gives you a lot of options to tweak things. So if you do take the time to tweak it, you can get it to work really well. But even here, it's not perfect. Performance will still drop in heavier scenes, and you still need to spend time adjusting settings to get the best result. And the biggest thing is, lossless scaling gets you close to that experience without any of that setup. Now, Need for Speed Unbound is another interesting case. First of all, this is an online-only game, so this kind of setup already isn't a good idea here, but I tried it anyway. And during that, the plugin just doesn't work properly. It's the same situation as it was with Remnant II. It will show you that it's not launching. However, with it on, performance is worse than what it would be if you didn't have any upscaling in the game. So the game naturally runs at around 30 FPS. However, with this enabled, with Optiscaler specifically enabled, there's going to be heavy ghosting, especially around the car, constant stuttering. It's just an unpleasant experience. And switching to lossless scaling, the game runs smoothly. It's not visually perfect, but it is consistent and very playable. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is another example where this tech exists and it should work. However, the plugin, it's just not working at all. I tried it with multiple different injection methods, but it never ends up unlocking DLSS, and frame generation never actually works. So effectively, it's not doing anything useful. Compared to lossless scaling does work in this game, but it has its own issues. Mainly, it will warp around particular parts of the screen, especially with UI elements, can be a bit nasty. Now, going back to Crimson Desert, which is probably the most important comparison, this is using the manual setup that I have with my guide on how to set it up. So I tested it and I tried to do it with the DLSS Enabler plugin. Doesn't work, but it does work when you take the time to learn how it works. It took time, it required tweaking, but it worked to a certain extent. and I have one video with the results with me playing it handheld or with the capture card. I do have another video with the guide, and this is really up to you if you want to try it. I do think that it works better with the DLSS enabler in terms of input latency. However, you will get this very nasty UI flickering. But with the plugin, again, you can't really get it to work at all. And I think that really highlights the main issue. Even in cases where this technology can work really well for the game, the plugin itself doesn't necessarily make it easier or better. And I have two more examples. Assassin's Creed Shadows. I spent a good amount of time trying different injection methods and it just wouldn't launch the game at all, compared to Lossless Scaling, where it straight up just works, no problem. And finally, No Man's Sky, the game launches but then breaks and crashes shortly after. Meanwhile, Lossless Scaling continues to just work consistently across all of these. So after testing all of this, I do think DLSS Enabler itself is a powerful tool. I think Optiscaler is an amazing tool, and frame generation on Steam Deck is definitely something that has a lot of potential when used correctly and with the correct games. But this kind of setup, it requires understanding, testing, and doing per game configurations. Trying to turn all of that into one-click solution, at least right now at this point of the development, it just doesn't work very well. And you're all essentially beta testing this. I would personally advise against using this plugin in its current state. The idea is bad, but because the way it's implemented right now can lead to inconsistent results, broken games, and a lot of confusion if something goes wrong. And if you're really interested in this kind of setup, if you really want to optimize your games, I would strongly recommend learning how the actual manual method works first and how these tools interact with one another. And I'll leave links in the description to Optiscaler and to DLSS Enabler so you can read about them and try and understand how this works. And that way, when you actually understand what's happening, if something breaks, you will be able to troubleshoot it and you'll be able to fix it for yourself. But let me know if you've tried this plugin yourself. Let me know your experience in the comments. I'm really curious to see how it's working for different people. And if you want more real Steam Deck testing and breakdowns like this, consider subscribing. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.